I'm Patricia Ezechie, and this is Proactive Empowered Careers, a space for thinking about careers differently, not as something separate from who you are, but as an expression of you and the life you want to live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. In the last episode, I introduced something new. That underneath everything we've been talking about in this podcast, the stuckness, the identity shifts, the environments, the adaptation, the tension that sometimes builds around work and life, there is actually a structure, a way of understanding how people move through these experiences. And I called that structure the Proactive Empowered Careers Method. At the center is the mindset, the way you relate to yourself, your choices, and your future. And around that sits what I call the 8 C's, 8 dimensions that shape how people experience their work and their lives over time. So over the next few episodes, we're going to take each of those elements in turn and begin to notice how they show up in your life. And that noticing, as you've probably already realized, is where this work really starts. And as you begin seeing things more clearly, the next step becomes, how do you work with this more practically? And that's what comes next. But for now, we're going to start by understanding the first dimension in the Proactive Empowered Careers method, connection. Because if there's a starting point for any real change in your career and life, it is this: reconnection with yourself. Now, when people hear the word connection, they sometimes assume it means connection with other people, relationships, networks, communication, and those things are all important and all matter. But the kind of connection we're talking about here is something slightly different. It's connection with yourself, your identity, your values, your priorities, and your energy, your sense of what matters to you. In other words, it's about knowing who you are and how you want your work and your life to fit together. Because your career isn't separate from your life. It's one of the ways your life expresses itself. And when you're connected to yourself, decisions about work begin to look very different. Now, here's the interesting part. Most people don't lose that connection because something dramatic happens. It usually happens slowly. Life gets busy, responsibilities increase, expectations accumulate, and all the roles that we play in our lives, they multiply. And we become very good at responding to what's directly in front of us. So opportunities appear, a job makes sense, a promotion arrives, a team needs someone reliable, a family needs stability, and step by step, we move forward. None of that is wrong. In fact, it's often intelligent and responsible. But over time, something subtle can begin to happen. We stop asking ourselves one simple question: what do I actually want now? Psychologists sometimes describe this as identity drift. This slow drifting away from who we really are and what we really want. Not because we've lost sight of ourselves completely, but because life has been moving quickly and we've just been going along with it. And our attention has been focused completely outward, on our responsibilities, on those expectations, on what needs to happen next. So gradually, that connection with our own preferences, our own values, and our own priorities becomes quieter. They haven't disappeared, they haven't gone, they've just been deprioritized. They've got quieter. And often the only way that we notice this is when something starts to feel off. When work that used to feel exciting doesn't feel like that anymore. In fact, sometimes it feels heavy. When success that used to feel motivating to us now sometimes feels flat. When decisions that used to feel obvious start to feel difficult, we start to prevaricate over things and become indecisive. We might find ourselves thinking, I should be happy with this, or on paper, this is exactly what I worked for, this is what I wanted. But somehow, inside of that, something inside of us doesn't feel fully aligned to ourselves anymore. And this is one of the reasons that we sometimes feel stuck in our careers. Not because we lack options, but because we can't quite see ourselves clearly inside the options that we have. And when that happens, it's really easy to assume that the issue is something else. It's confidence, or it's our motivation, or that we lack discipline. But in reality, what's really happening is often something deep and a much deeper issue. It's that connection. We've lost connection to ourselves. So this is why connection is the first dimension that we explore in the Practice of Empowered Careers method. Because clarity about your career doesn't come from thinking about your career harder. It comes from understanding yourself better. When you know what matters to you, when you understand how your identity has evolved, and when you recognize the environments where you feel most like yourself, you begin to see opportunities differently. Now, they might be the same job options, and they might be very similar conversations and very similar decisions, but you see them through a different lens because your identity and your career have evolved together. So you're looking at things from a different perspective. Because the person you are now is not the person who made decisions 5 or 10 years ago. And reconnecting with yourself now allows your career to evolve alongside who you are now. Now, the good news about this whole work of reconnection is it doesn't actually require dramatic action. Because sometimes when we think about these things like reconnection and connection, it can feel heavy, and it doesn't have to be. You don't need to reinvent your life overnight. What this reconnection means is that most of the time, it begins much more quietly than that. It begins with noticing. We've been practicing that now for so many episodes. Noticing what energizes you. Noticing what drains you. Noticing where you feel most like yourself, you feel most natural. Noticing where you feel like you're performing. Noticing what conversations spark curiosity in you. And noticing what work feels meaningful. These small observations can help you begin to rebuild that connection. Not through pressure, but through awareness. And that awareness gradually changes how you see yourself and your life. Now, as with all of this, there's another dimension to this as well. Sometimes disconnection doesn't just show up as uncertainty about your career. Sometimes it shows up physically. Because you keep going, you keep delivering, you keep pushing through, but you stop listening to the signals coming from your own body. You override tiredness. You override frustration. You override that quiet sense that something isn't right in your body anymore. Many capable people are very good at doing this. They become highly functional, highly reliable, highly productive, and they keep delivering, keep pushing through, keep forcing. But eventually, something starts to give. Their energy starts to drop off. Motivation begins to disappear. Their patience might shorten. Their body might start to send stronger signals. And sometimes that's when burnout appears. Not because someone is weak, but because the connection between thinking, feeling, and their physical experience of themselves has been overridden for far too long. And in that overriding, they've missed those gentle signals saying, stop, pause, rest, until the signals have to become so loud that the body has to stop completely. They burn out. So part of reconnecting with yourself is not just noticing your thoughts. It's also learning to listen again to your body. Really listening. Listening to your energy. listening to your reactions, listening to the signals that tell you when something fits and when it doesn't. And one of the most important things that allows that listening to happen is, of course, creating space for it. Because when life is moving constantly, when every hour in your life is filled, every decision is urgent, every responsibility is immediate, there is very little room to hear yourself clearly in all of that. So that's why I always advocate that this process of reconnection begins with something very simple. Creating enough space to hear yourself again. Hasn't got to be huge amounts of space or dramatic shifts in creating space, but allowing and creating small moments of reflection. Small pauses in all that noise. Moments where your attention can be allowed to turn inward long enough to notice what's actually going on for you. And from there, slowly and gently, connection begins to rebuild. Now, there's a sentence I often use when talking about this idea. I say reconnection with yourself is the starting point for any real change. It's about coming home to your identity, your values, your purpose, and your truth beyond your roles, beyond titles or expectations. Because when you've connected to who you actually are, something important shifts. You move from survival mode into self-leadership. Instead of reacting to circumstances, you begin relating to them more consciously. Instead of simply responding to expectations, you begin asking whether those expectations still fit in your life. And that doesn't mean rejecting everything around you. It just means your decisions start coming from a clearer place, from what matters to you, for what will support you, for what will allow you to thrive, not just survive. And this really matters. Because when you rebuild that connection with yourself, something very interesting happens. You stop assuming something is wrong with you. You stop forcing decisions before you're ready. You stop trying to solve complex career and life questions with quick career fixes. Instead, you begin hearing and understanding yourself more clearly, and that clarity gradually creates something really powerful for you. Agency. That sense that even if you don't control every circumstance in your career or your life, you still have more influence than you think. And this is where a lot of people pause. Because you can begin to see all this and still not be entirely sure what to do with it. And that's part of the process. And we come to that a bit later on. So for now, as you move through this week, here's something simple to notice. When do you feel most like yourself? Not the version of you that performs well, or the version of you that meets expectation. The version of you that feels natural. The version of you that feels curious, engaged, alive. Because those moments often tell you more about what matters to you than any career plan ever could. Because connection isn't just about knowing what you think, it's about recognizing what your whole system is telling you. And noticing that and understanding that is often the first signals that connection is returning. So that was the first dimension in the Proactive Empowered Careers method, connection. And next time we'll explore the second dimension in the framework, curiosity. Because once you reconnect with yourself, something very natural tends to follow. You begin asking new questions. And curiosity is where possibility really begins. So we'll explore that together next time. So until next week, take the very best care of yourself. This has been proactive, empowered careers. If today's episode resonated, follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss what comes next. And if this podcast is supporting you, leaving a short review helps others find these conversations. And remember, your career isn't separate from who you are. It's an expression of you and the life you want to live.